All right, so today we're taking a look at a $1,300 to $1,400 RTX 3060 Ti gaming PC build. In fact, that system right there is what we're gonna be checking out, and this is going to be a system that I'll be using as my main workstation moving forward until I can upgrade the CPU that we'll be talking about in just a minute to a 5000 series 12 or 16 core chip. And it's also a system that will be great for those of you who are looking for max 1080p with very high FPS. So I'm talking like, 144 plus, as well as max 1440p with around 100 FPS. Again, in most titles. Not all titles are gonna let you, push those frames, but in most titles. Now, before we get into why I chose the parts and which parts I chose, I want to reiterate that the build we are taking a look at today is going to be my personal workstation. And so it has some extra parts in there that you will not need just for gaming or even if you're just starting content creation. Namely, I have like extra drives in there, I have more memory, and then I also have a beefier motherboard that I would typically recommend for the parts we're gonna be using. That being said, I'm going to be leaving a link to two parts lists down in the description box below. The first is gonna be a cut down version of the system that will be actually showing you the build and everything today, and it's gonna have substantially cheaper parts and provide about the same exact gaming performance for that $1,300 price point that I'm focusing on for this video. And then the second is gonna be more or less the exact same system I put together in this video and that I'll be personally using for my workstation moving forward. Now, if you are looking to build a PC, the cut down version is gonna be the one I recommend for the parts that we're using here today, especially for those of you guys who just want to game. And it will be great to venture into content creation at some point if that's something that you're looking to get into. It'll look very, very similar to the system we put together here today in this video. And it also includes the fancy sleeved extensions, the RGB fans, as well as the AIO CPU cooler. So don't think that, I'm presenting like this really beautiful, absolutely nice looking PC and then not giving you guys a parts list that will let you do that too, because I am. This build is going to look, your system, if you build even the cheaper one, it'll look very similar to the one that we're putting together for myself. This obviously is great because if $1,300 is still out of your budget or you don't want to spend that much money on like the system that we're looking at, you can always forego like the fancy extra sleeves, which do cost more, the RGB fans, and the AIO CPU cooler. You can bring it down to about $1,150. It of course won't look as good if you don't get those items, and your system will be a little bit toastier than if you have those parts. But overall, it should perform just about the same as if you don't have them, and you can always add those down the line once you get the extra money to throw into your build. Now, let's talk parts before we get into the actual build montage as well as the benchmarks. As you guys already see, I already put together some systems, so I already have the build montage and everything put together for you guys. But first, before we get into that as well as the benchmarks, I want to talk about the parts. So the CPU I used in this build and that I'll be using for my workstation system moving forward is the Ryzen 5 3600. It's a 6-core 12-thread monster of a CPU. Yes, it's technically last generation, but until the Ryzen 5 5600 is released, not the 5600X, but the 5600 for the rumored $230, I think it's probably the best valued gaming, streaming, as well as content creation CPU currently on the market. The only downside going into 2021, looking at today, is that the Ryzen 5 3600 is currently pretty overpriced due to the lack of available stock. And so until we see the Ryzen 5 3600 return to its $160 to $170 price point, or until we see the 5600 get released, which again is not released as of right now, you might actually be better off grabbing the i5-10400F and one of the cheaper Z490 boards instead. Now, this chip is not going to be as good in productivity as the 3600, but for gaming, it's definitely going to do a little bit better as long as you have that Z490 board. If you don't have that, then the memory won't be able to be pushed as much and you won't get as much performance. For the CPU cooler, I went with the ID Cooling ZoomFlow 240X AIO water cooler. This is an all-white AIO, and I think it looks absolutely incredible. I've been using it for several months, and it cools the 3900X really, really well. And then, of course, the 3600 gets cooled even better with it. I wanted to test it out for a while before I put it into one of my builds because it is kind of like one of those off-brand names, and so I didn't know if it was going to be junk and the quality was going to be bad. But I've been using it for a few months, and I absolutely love it. Now, it is kind of overkill for like the 3600, so if you're putting together a system very similar to the one I'm showing you here today in this video, You can save money and just not get the AIO if you don't want. You can go ahead and use the stock AMD cooler. It should work fine with the 3600. It'll be a little bit toasty, but it should work fine. Or you can go ahead and get a cheaper single tower cooler such as the ID Cooling SE224XT or the Arctic Freezer 34. Both of those coolers do come in white, and both of the coolers are really, really nice. So if you are looking to get a nice performing cooler for the 3600 and you want to keep that white theme that I have for this build, you know, those both will be great options for you. For the motherboard, I went with the MSI B550 Mag Tomahawk motherboard. This is a bit pricier for a B550 board, pushing $180, but it's an absolutely incredible board that can easily manage any of the 5000 series Ryzen chips with ease. It also has solid aesthetics, and the looks fit in really well with the all white and kind of gray theme that I'm pushing for this build. Two great alternatives that will also match the theme of this build are going to be the ASRock B550M Pro 4, and then not as much, but the MSI B550M Pro VDH Wi-Fi if you're looking to find something that's a little bit cheaper. The Pro 4 bounces in at between $90 and $115. I see this thing go on sale all the time. I just saw it on a couple weeks ago. It was 90 bucks. I almost bought a second one because that's really cheap for this board. And then the Pro VDH Wi-Fi bounces in between $100 and $110. I would get whichever one's cheaper or whichever one you like the looks of better. And again, for this build, I would highly recommend one of those two over the Mag Tomahawk, unless you know you're going to be overclocking a 12 or 16 core chip down the road. For memory, we are using two 32GB kits of 3200 MHz Cas16 Crucial Ballistics RGB memory in white. There's 4 DIMMs total. They fit the build theme very, very, very well. And what's also awesome is that these ballistic kits are known for their overclocking prowess. And so if you're considering getting into memory overclocking or just overclocking in general, these DIMMs could be a very, very, very nice option for you. I will also note that for a gaming PC, you really only need 16GB of memory at this time. And so that is all I have in the cut down version of the parts list. I have 64 gigs in my system. That's what I'm using for this build. But again, 16 gigs is all you need for gaming, and so that's all I left in the cut down version. Now, if you plan to do a bit of video editing or productivity work, I would recommend getting a 32GB kit instead of 16GB. That's going to go a long way for you when it comes down to video editing. For storage, I used an Inland Premium 512GB M.2, an Intel 660p 1TB M.2, and a 500GB Samsung 850 EVO. For you guys, as I was mentioning earlier, I don't recommend you guys getting 3 SSDs, of course. Instead, grab a quality M.2, 500GB-ish, and then a 2TB hard drive. That's like the perfect combination. I recommend it all the time in the videos I do just like this. And I think for you guys, it'll save you guys the most money and it'll give you guys the best like storage, size, speed, bang for buck kind of deal. For the graphics card, you guys of course know what we're targeting, the RTX 3060 Ti. You can get the Founders Edition for 400 bucks, but I budgeted $450 for this card as I feel like the higher price cards get too close to the RTX 3070 series of cards, and so I think that $450 price point will kind of cover the vast majority of you guys that are actually looking to get this card. So I don't think most of you are going to spend over $450 if you want a 3060 Ti, so that's what I put it at. I really kind of wish that we saw more cards at the MSRP, but with the stock issues, I don't think we'll see that for at least the next couple of months. And again, for the crypto issues that we're having right now, it could get worse too, which I'm praying and praying and praying that, you know, stock gets resolved here soon and that AMD as well as NVIDIA get their stock issues in check so that we're not going through this kind of issue. In any case though, the RTX 3060 Ti is a great value card at between $400 and $450, and I have the Founders Edition and it's a super, super quiet card. I've also tested the MSI Ventus version and that one's super quiet as well. They're really, really nice and I'm really impressed with how powerful they are and how quiet they are. And on top of that, they both stayed pretty cool as well. On mine, my Founders Edition with the system right here, tops out at 74 degrees Celsius while gaming, which is, you know, it's pretty good for a graphics card in general. For the case, I use the Corsair 4000D Airflow. You guys can see it back there. I don't know if you guys can see it very well. Simply put, this is one of the best mid-tower cases I've ever built in. Hands down, like there is no arguing here. Corsair did a great job with this, and I'll talk more about like the actual build process a little bit towards the end because I want to make some comments on that. But the premise of what I'm going to say is that it's not just a great looking case that has great airflow, but it's also a great case for first time builders due to the ease of cable management alone. Cable management on this case is stunning. It's great. It's amazing. I love it. It's incredible. I would love to see Corsair make maybe a little bit smaller one for like the $50 to $60 price range as well. It's very similar in aesthetics. I could see that selling really well, competing against the P300 that I love as well at the cheaper price point. To round out the core components, the power supply I use for this build is going to be the EVGA G2 750 watt fully modular power supply. This is Gold Plus rated, and I've been using this in my system for many years now, since I've bought it like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, and I love it. It's an absolutely great unit, and it has like a 10-year plus warranty, so I'm going to continue to use that in my builds moving forward. If you've watched any of my videos for me upgrading my personal rig, you've seen it in that system. Now, instead of using that, because you're not going to really be able to find the G2 out there, I threw the EVGA B5 750 watt fully modular power supply instead. There's a great bunch of power supplies out there. Go check out the power supplies tier list to find a good quality one. I'd say B or A rating one. And I'll have it again, I'll have the tier list in the description box below. But again, I always recommend the B5 right now because it's typically a pretty good price for what you're actually going to be getting. Now, 750 watts is going to be slightly overkill for this kind of build, but looking at the current power supply pricing is what pushed me to buy the 750 watts over the 650 watt version. The 650 watt version is about $10 cheaper as of recording this video than the 750 watt power supply. So for me, I'm like $10. Yeah, jump up to the 750 because then you'll have the extra wattage, you'll have the extra headroom, and if you decide you want to grab like a 3080, you should be perfectly fine with that as well. The final two parts of the build are going to be 100% optional, and I mentioned them earlier, but they really are going to make this build pop, and it's going to shine, and it's going to make it look really, really incredible. So first off, I threw in a set of Asia Horse FS 9002 120mm RGB fans. For just under $12 per fan, these are absolutely incredible when it comes down to value. They move a good amount of air, they are super quiet, and have pretty solid looking RGB as well. The only downside I found with them is that they use a proprietary header that plugs into their fan hub. And so if your hub for some reason dies, your fans are no longer usable until you get a replacement hub, which for me is kind of a huge bummer. The second thing is going to be the sleeve cables. These are also Asia Horse branded, and quality wise, I was actually super impressed with them. They feel top notch. I expected them kind of be a little bit flimsy, kind of feel like they're cheap extensions, you know what I mean? But they're not. They felt great. Every cable I tugged on them pretty good. Every cable felt really well built. So now that we've gone ahead and we've talked about what parts we're going to use and why, let's take a look at how we put it together as well as how it performs. All right, so this system all around is pretty awesome in my opinion for that $1,100 to $1,400 price point, as long as you can kind of find yourself the RTX 3060 Ti. I know it's been a pretty rough ride when it comes down to like getting inventory for like the new graphics cards and the new CPUs, but I do expect, as long as crypto doesn't take over the entire market, for stock to normalize over the next couple months or so. And when it does, this video is going to be here to help guide you guys in selecting the best parts for your upcoming build. Now, there are a couple things I wanted to talk about in regards to parts that were selected for this build. Just a couple things that I found worth mentioning to you guys just to help make your building experience a little bit easier and to kind of help make you understand the build a bit more as well. First of all, for Corsair not really bringing many new cases to the market over the past few years, the 4000D is a massive reminder that they still exist in the case market and they don't really have plans to be going anywhere either. This case provides a ton of room in the back and tons of anchors for cable ties, and man, was it easy to build in. Aesthetically, it's absolutely beautiful, and performance-wise, it provides a ton of airflow for your system, and so you won't see your system bogged down by heat. Second thing I wanted to mention for you guys is that if you are able to get your hands on a RTX Founders Edition 3060 Ti, 3070, or 3080, Asia Horse does sell a cable extension for that 12-pin proprietary NVIDIA connector. And the final thing I want to mention is that for the Asia Horse fans, you're gonna need to manually sync it to your motherboard. Look at the manual, it'll tell you how to sync it or how to turn sync mode on. If you don't have that on, the fans just do whatever they want, or they just follow the remote and they won't follow your motherboard's RGB software. So if you have like an MSI motherboard and you want to follow the Mystic lighting software, it won't follow that unless you put sync mode on, so make sure you put sync mode on. Anyway, thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and let me know what you guys think of this build and what you would change if you were to build a system similar to this. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, consider subscribing for more tech content just like this. And if you have any questions at all, go ahead and drop them in the comments below, or go ahead and join our free community Discord and drop them there instead. We have a ton planned for you guys in 2021. I can't wait to share it all with you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.